SPI.
Sup everyone, it is I, SPI, and in this video I'm going to be ranking all 11 of the Ninjago seasons leading up into Season 12. I'm going to just say I've seen the first episode of Season 12. It was in a different language, but I saw it and it was amazing. So I have high hopes for Season 12. I think it's going to be good, but there are some seasons in Ninjago that I don't think it's going to be able to beat. And I'm going to get into them in this video. Ninjago is one of my favorite shows, so if I say that a season isn't as good as another season, that doesn't mean I don't like that season. I just don't like it as much, but I still consider that season to be good because it's Ninjago. Also, this is just my opinion, so please don't hate on me too much, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, because we all have our own opinions and we all like different things that other people might not like. So without further ado, my least favorite Ninjago season is Hands of Time. I think it's mainly because they got a different writer for this season, so a lot of the characters just don't feel like themselves. There's just some stuff that they say, like especially like Jay and Zane, just doesn't seem like them. And I mean, it's pretty much all the ninja that have been written by the same guys for all the other seasons up to this point, with the exception of Day of the Departed, which I know isn't a season, so it's not on my list. But that would probably be slightly above Hands of Time if that was on my list, because I enjoyed it for the most part, but I also didn't because it was so just condensed, and it could have been expanded into a whole season about the villains coming back, which would have been awesome. And the plot lines in Hands of Time were kind of weird. The villains were cool. Like, I like the idea of villains from the past and incorporating the elemental masters, the old elemental masters, into the story and having, like, Kai go back in time. That was really cool. But the plot lines leading up to that were just, they were kind of weird, and I didn't like how the whole thing was so based in Ninjago City, and it didn't feel like they were doing that much special stuff in this season. It just felt like, oh, there's a couple villains, they got an army, and they're trying to build this weapon, and we're gonna go in Ninjago City and take a bunch of metal and use that to build the weapon. And we got like 4 collectible weapons. The first one is coming in the very first episode, and then one's like way too overpowered, so we're putting it in at the end, and then 2 are just going to come in randomly at some points. It doesn't really make sense that if they've been banished, I guess, can weapons be banished for like so many years, they all just come in within the same like week or so. So I don't know, I wasn't really feeling this season as much. Lloyd getting trained was a decent idea, but they didn't develop it well enough. And overall, this season had great ideas, but they just weren't executed well. Coming in at number 10, I hate to say this, but Secrets of Forbidden Spinjitzu. Season 11 of Ninjago. This story actually had a lot of potential. It had the potential to be the best Ninjago season, which with where it was going and how it was being bold and doing 30 episodes. But the villains were weak, with the exception of one, which I'm going to get into in a bit here. It was just repetitive, and not to mention, like, there were filler episodes in there, and, like, some of these filler episodes I enjoyed, like the Lil Nelson one, but there were just some that just weren't needed. Also, the Ice Village in the Ice chapter of it, the ninja didn't have to stay there for so long. Like, they were just there for so long, and then they finally go out to fight the Blizzard Samurai, and it really just doesn't last that long. And that whole infight between Lloyd and Zane was awesome, and we just barely got to see the Ice Emperor. Like, we didn't see him that much, and honestly, I think that the Ice Emperor is probably one of the best Ninjago villains that is out there. Ninjago took, like, one of their kindest characters and turned him into just this horrible villain that was, like, making a species extinct and going off and just murdering this village of formlings. Like, Ninjago, it was like there's a lot of boldness going on in that whole process of, like, turning Zane into the villain. And I was super excited to see like where the story was going. And once you got up to Lloyd encountering Zane and fighting him, there was some payoff, but it just fell flat because it didn't feel like there was enough, I guess. And with the fire chapter, I've talked about like this stuff before on my channel, and Asphira just wasn't a good villain. Bringing the Serpentine back could have been a good idea. I liked how they got into the backstory and talked about Forbidden Spinjitzu. That was a really cool idea that they introduced, but it just wasn't developed as well as it could have been. And coming in at number 9 is March of the Oni. Again, it doesn't mean that I don't like these seasons because they're lower on my list. Like, March of the Oni is something that I actually really enjoyed, and I thought was a really good Ninjago movie because, I mean, the Lego Ninjago movie was kind of good for what it was, but really, if you compare it to Ninjago, it's just not good. Or at least in my opinion. Please don't hate me in the comments. But March of the Oni, this is what I would have liked to see in theaters. Something like this. Maybe developed a bit more. I feel like it was definitely stronger, like in the first half. But once you got up to the Oni coming in, and that like last episode, the finale just, it wasn't developed as well as it could have been. Like, same issues with Secrets of Forbidden Spinjitzu, except I really liked the ending of Secrets of Forbidden Spinjitzu with Zane remembering, except that this wasn't expanded upon as much as it could have been. Whereas in March of the Oni, oh wow, we're doing the Tornado of Creation. Boom, everything's fixed. And Cole's just alive. Like, wait, what? He fell from like a skyscraper and he's alive? It's reasons like that this season is lower on my list. I mean, it had an excellent premise. And like the stakes were high. The Oni had been something that they were setting up for so long. And they had this arc that had been building up from Sons of Garmadon and Hunted. And then everybody was like hyped. They're like, oh, the Oni are coming. And they really weren't developed that much. And they had the potential to be some of Ninjago's best villains. And there's not much that's interesting about them. They're a super powerful army that can shapeshift, but actually didn't shapeshift in this movie. And they're evil. I mean, that's all I can think of to describe them, I guess. This season also had some of the funniest scenes. Like that one scene with Lloyd and Garmadon where Garmadon was smiling. That was great. And also Garmadon talking to the cameraman was really great. And that whole emotional scene about how Cole might have died. Like, if Cole actually died and he had to come back somehow in the next season, and they made that fight against the Oni like way more intense, I think March of the Oni would be way higher on my list. And a lot of you guys are going to hate me for this, but number 8 on my list is Rebooted. I really like this season. This was like the comeback for Ninjago, because everybody thought, oh no, Ninjago is ending, it's being replaced by Chima, but our support led to the creators of Ninjago to bring it back, and I think this was like one of the best things that they could do, was like incorporate tech into it and make it like futuristic, and oh, Ninjago's advanced and that kind of thing. But the thing that really puts it back for me is the fact that the plot line is kind of all over the place, and it doesn't have like a consistent flow to it, I guess, where it has like the first 2 episodes, and those are episodes, and you have like the next 2, and you have the next 2, and then the next 2. And I mean, that can be good, but for Ninjago, I prefer to have like one coherent story where it starts with the first episode and it just like leads straight through. And with Rebooted, it kind of had that, but it was more so focused on, oh, we got this story about the ninja having to stop the blackout, and then, oh, they stopped the blackout, but no, the Ninjroids are actually going to come back. They aren't defeated yet. We're bringing them back, like, within the 3rd episode. And then the Serpentine are good guys now. That's a big reason why it was put down on my list, because I think I've talked about my complaint with that before. They just randomly became good guys. There wasn't that much motivation in it. It's just, oh, we went straight. Like, what? You guys were fighting the ninja, trying to take over Ninjago for so long, and suddenly you're good? What? Also, like the thing about Borg, like becoming evil again. I would have liked it a lot more if he actually turned out to be evil rather than becoming hypnotized, and then maybe there'd be like a redemption arc and he would assist the ninja in like the finale and become the secondary character he is today. But this season, at least in my opinion, probably had one of the best finales in all of Ninjago, which is why it's higher on my list than March of the Oni, I guess. I mean, I like the other ones more. That's why it's lower. But I was considering putting it higher because this finale with Zane sacrificing himself, I mean, that's just one of the best parts of this season. Zane's character arc just building up into this. It's amazing. The next season on my list is Hunted. I really like this season. It was a great follow-up to Sons of Garmadon, but it didn't keep the pace of Sons of Garmadon in some areas. Like you'd get to the city scenes with Lloyd and Nia, and it'd be like, oh no, Garmadon's taking over the city, and then it'd jump to the Oni and Dragon stuff, and I'd be like, come on, please get back to Ninjago City, because I'm not as interested in this. It seemed kind of okay. Like, I wasn't invested as much into the Oni and Dragon stuff as I was into the Ninjago City plotline, and the Ninjago City plotline wasn't as good as it could have been. So that's why it's lower on my list. But this was still a really great season with how they handled it, especially with like bringing back the Elemental Masters and having the ninja rely on allies that they have made in some of the previous Ninjago seasons. Number 6 is Skybound. And I know this season gets a lot of hate, which I don't think it deserves, because the writers with this season had such a big predicament, because the character of Nauticon, with him being like this villain that seems to almost have like ultimate power, or is gonna achieve infinite wishes like ultimate power, that's really hard to write with. And I know personally kind of how that feels with the character of Destiny Alter from Students of Spinjitzu. And so with that in mind, and also the fact that this is a J season, and that's something that like has never been done before, like that really moves this season up on my list. The stakes are really high in this one as the ninjas just fall one by one, and it's so great that it's in Jay's perspective. It really gives him a lot more character development, and I'm really sad that like he doesn't have that much in a lot of the later seasons, because he's just played off as like this comedic character, and he's silly and he releases villains, I guess. And it's a bit disappointing because Skybound was really Jay's time to shine, and it was super awesome how they did it. And so that's why it's up on my list. They also handled romance very well. And what puts it back is that Nauticon as a villain, he kind of falls short because he has so much potential, but in the end he's this character that is just so obsessed with having everything that he betrays everyone, and he has this ultimate power, and yet he still is defeated in the end, and that's why it's put back on my list. Number 5 is Season 2. I'm really disappointed that this is lower on my list, but as I was rewatching all these seasons, there were some things that held it back for me and put a few of the other seasons higher on the list. But overall, this season is amazing. Like the Mega Weapon arc, people really don't think about it too much, and I feel like it's one of the most underrated arcs in all of Ninjago, because it's such a good way of developing the character of Garmadon, and it can be like so fun at times. And without this Mega Weapon arc, without Garmadon constantly trying to like defeat the ninja and failing, you wouldn't get to Garmadon fighting Lloyd in the final battle and all that stuff that happens after that. Like the Garmadon that we remember a lot of the times is the guy that was in these episodes. As for the latter half of the season, I can't say the same thing because it's a very different tone, and it's very different from the first half of the season, and that's kind of why this season is lower on my list. The final battle also is not the final battle, and I know the writers at the time didn't know that, but like just go back and watch something like Return of the Overlord, for example. Some of the writing in it, some of the lines, they just aren't that good. There's a lot of, this is the final battle, this is how it ends, it all ends now. There's a lot of like that language in some of these last episodes of season 2, and it's a little cringy. Very different from the first half of the season where you're like laughing and having fun. All the ninja are fighting themselves and they're going in a race, which was probably one of my favorite episodes of the earlier seasons. My favorite episode in it is Wrong Place, Wrong Time, and it's a great episode because you look back at what came before and the ninja realize how much has changed, but it also kind of has some plot holes in it, and there are some that kind of get into the rest of the season where you're like, wait a second, how does Lloyd not know that Garmadon had a mega weapon and the Serpentine are teamed up with him still? If that never happened, how does that make sense? So that also kind of puts it back, those plot holes. I also really would have liked Lloyd to be developed more into becoming older rather than just boom, he's older. Can't forget Dareth, by the way. This is the season that introduced Dareth. Some of the funniest stuff in Ninjago is in these season 2 episodes. Number 4 is Tournament of Elements. This season, man, this like first half of the season, amazing. Man, this is a great idea. Just a great way to start off the season with the ninja going into this tournament and meeting like different elemental masters. It is a little weird that like they established this concept of elemental powers and how they got them from Lloyd, but then there are other elemental masters who just inherited them, and now also the ninja inherited them, but they got them from Lloyd. It's a little confusing, and it's a little bit of a plot hole, but it's not too much of an issue where it holds the season back. And I really like how they balanced having like all these new characters introduced, and the fights were just really cool, and you could be like really hyped for the next episode. You'd be like, oh yeah, is Kai gonna fight in the tournament? Oh, I remember when the Jay and Cole episode was happening, like that was one of the most anticipated episodes because people were like, Jay and Cole are gonna fight, this is gonna be so fun to watch, but also heartbreaking at the same time. And the mystery around Chen was cool, and like incorporating the Anachondri into it, but the story shifts like halfway through and it becomes less about the tournament and more about Chen wanting to turn into an Anachondri. And I really like the tournament stuff, but once you get into like Chen trying to take over Ninjago as an Anachondri, it doesn't live up to its potential. It doesn't live up to its full potential. And I think if they did something where you finish the tournament in the right way, I don't know, it's kind of weird because it like balanced 2 plot lines into one season, and I think they should have just stuck with one. And number 3 is Possession. One of the great highlights of this season is the fact that it has such a great villain who's introduced. He's relatable. The character of Moro is kind of a parallel to Kai, where Kai wanted to be the Green Ninja, but he accepted that Lloyd is the Green Ninja and has been helping him with his journey, whereas Moro goes a different route and he doesn't like that Lloyd's the Green Ninja, so he wants to make himself be the Green Ninja. He wants to defeat Lloyd and unleash his master upon the realms. One of the really cool things about Possession is the fact that like the ninja are so in the dark at the beginning, and there's this mystery as it goes along. And so there's like this road trip adventure where they were on yaks or something, and they were like going to the City of Styx, and then they meet Ronan, who's a great character. In my opinion, he's one of the best secondary characters that's introduced, maybe besides Dareth, but Ronan's just probably my favorite character in like the whole show. And there was some really good writing in there with Ronan's backstory and how that tied into the Soul Archer, and Moro having to talk to Ronan and Ronan giving him the sword, that kind of thing. And it also introduced some big concepts that just completely changed the Ninjago world. Like for one thing, with Cole becoming a ghost, that was something that like nobody expected, it seemed like, and it was just like, whoa, like Ninjago. They killed off Zane, but they brought him back. But when they turned Cole into a ghost, it was like, man, this is a huge change the show just did. And I was expecting him to become a human at the end of the season, and when he didn't, I was a little disappointed, but at the same time I was like, wow, Ninjago is really bold. And they also introduced the concept of like different realms. So they expanded the Ninjago world in that way. Like the Cloud Kingdom was introduced, which is really cool, and kind of students of Spinjitzu, the character of Destiny Altar, wouldn't exist without the Cloud Kingdom. Nia's arc was really great in this season because in a lot of the seasons before that, Nia was just like a secondary character, just a side character that would get like some moments, and she became Samurai X, and that was kind of cool. But when she became a ninja and like had her own story and eventually unlocked her true potential, that was just very well written, like how they did that and how they eventually in the end made Nia the hero instead of Lloyd, which a lot of times it's like, oh, Lloyd the Green Ninja, but Nia saved the day, and it was really great. And at the end there, it packed a big emotional punch by making us feel sorry for the villain's death, which is really hard to do because sometimes in Ninjago, like when the Overlord died, nobody really cared. It was all the focus was on Zane. No, Zane died. But when Moro died, man, that was heartbreaking. By nobody really cared, I mean like nobody was crying. people want the Overlord to return. I know that, but that's not what I meant. All right, this next one is a big surprise for me because when I first watched it, I was like, it's lower on my list. But when I rewatched the Ninjago seasons, this is, in my opinion, the best Ninjago season, except for one or two reasons which held it back. And that Ninjago season, coming in at number 2, is Sons of Garmadon. Honestly, like this opening, man, it was really good. Probably the best opening episode of Ninjago, in my opinion. This season really was like next level stuff. The intensity was amazing. I loved how like the storyline had like such a great pace, and there was so much just intrigue and mystery in it. And also the creators of it were not afraid to get dark and take risks with it. And having Lloyd grow up and have that development and introducing Harumi was really cool. But then that twist at the end where like she's the villain and having Lloyd face like that heartbreak, man, there's just some great stuff in this. And the choice to bring Garmadon back, at first when I heard about it, I was like, why are they doing this? But it was played out really well in this season with the Oni masks, especially with the fact that like there were only 3 collectible weapons. And like with Hands of Time, it was like, oh, you got the first one in the first episode, and you got 2 randomly in there, and you got 1 like close to the end. But in this, Ninjago didn't rely on the fact that the ninja have to go after these collectible artifacts, which is what they do in so many of their seasons. But they didn't do that. They had like the first one in there initially, and then the second one in there later on, and I think it was episode 1. And then the third Oni mask was like later on in the season, and they really didn't seem to be as important as like other collectible artifacts, even though the stakes were really high, and that's what the heroes were trying to find. So I liked how they focused a lot more on character development and just making sure it has a good pace and was intense. And that finale, that twist at the end where Garmadon wins and he takes over, that was kind of unexpected. And man, this Ninjago season was just, I mean, Tommy Andreasen, I'm pretty sure he said it was like next level Ninjago or something when it, like before it came out, he said something like that. And not many people believed him, but yes, this is next level Ninjago. The big thing that pulls it back for me, don't hate on me for this, by the way, please don't hate on me. Yes, the design changes. Yes, this is a problem. A lot of people are like, oh, you know, look past it. It had to happen, you know, with the movie coming out. First of all, the Lego Ninjago movie is not canon to Ninjago. It's not even that great. I know I said that before in the video. And the Ninjago designs of like Kai, Zane, Cole, sorry Jay, I forgot about you. Jay, Nia, and I mean Baby Woo is cool. That made sense. Even Garmadon changing his design made sense. And Lloyd, I liked how they changed the character of Lloyd. And Zane, you know, Zane was fine. But a lot of those other characters, like especially Jay, like why? If they kept the original designs, this season would probably be at number 1 to me. But the fact that they just didn't even give it that much explanation and were just like, oh, Hands of Time, not that great season, and we have the original designs. Really great season, but we're going to mess up the designs. Like, so close to being in at my number one. But in first place is the original Ninjago season, Rise of the Snakes. I think this season had probably the best character development in the whole show. Like, with the first 2 episodes of the series, like Way of the Ninja and King of the Shadows, they didn't develop the ninja too much like they developed Kai, but the other characters, not that much. But once you started watching season 1 of Ninjago, they like started developing the character of Cole with like the first episode and him like being mind controlled, and then Zane with like him feeling different from the rest of the group. That was really cool, like how they developed Zane, and then him becoming a robot. Man, that twist was just mind-blowing at the time. Their full potentials, like each of them unlocking them in a different episode, that was really cool. Just the Serpentine, like I was very skeptical when I heard that they were having a snake villain in this season. I was like, why not the skeletons? And then they announced, oh, it's going to be a snake season. But they did it so well, and it set up the whole show with like introducing different villains. And if this season didn't do well, everything else would just not happen. And that finale at the end, it could have used some improvement, but for what it was, great way to end the series. Something that kind of holds the season back a little bit was the fact that like Sensei Wu, so early on in the show, was like, I'm gonna die, and yet he's still around, but he's still one of my favorite characters, so I'm glad that didn't happen. And there's also just some really great memories in this season, some really great moments, like with the talent show and the ninja performing on stage. And overall, Ninjago Season 1 Rise of the Snakes, in my opinion, please don't hate on me, is the best season of the series. If you enjoyed this video and you're not mad at me, please consider sticking around and subscribing. And also, sorry if I, put your favorite Ninjago season like lower on the list. The next video that I'm going to release is called 100 Things That Have Changed in Ninjago since my first 100 Things video, which is called 100 Things That Have Changed in Ninjago since old Ninjago or something like that. It's this video right here. So this new one is going to be my last 100 Things video, but it's also going to address everything that's changed from Hands of Time to the present time. Stay tuned for that. And lastly, if you guys didn't know already, I wrote a book. It's called Rise of the Gray Ninja. It's an action-adventure novel about a teenager who trains to become a ninja in a realistic world. So if you're interested in picking one up for yourself, the link will be down in the description. Please don't hate on the book if you didn't like this video. Hopefully I'll see y'all next time.